2 college football player props here on PrizePicks for Saturday, September 14th. Before we get started, you guys, link in the description below. Hop into the premium Discord, $9.30 per month, 31 cents per day. That is where I post all the plays I'm making on PrizePicks. Other cappers in there as well. They're posting all their plays. Super positive community. Everyone's trying to help each other cash. This is actually how we did on all my plays last college football Saturday. The only three of the misses, we missed on 4 plays. 3 of the 4 plays that we did miss on were actually goblins. So we pretty much hit in every single core play that I did put out. Again, link in the description below, 31 cents per day, $9.30 per month, premium Discord. But let's get into it, you guys. I got 2 player props, college football slate. Again, we're looking to just hit on 2 of these YouTube plays. I know we've been having some weird misses, like Jalen Waddle yesterday, like 8.6 fantasy points. Tua gets hurt in the third quarter. He throws 3 picks. Just game script that you can't really predict. But looking to bounce back here. Again, 2 player props, college football slate, Saturday, September 14th. Let's get right into it. Again, I'll put a pinned comment in the description below if both of these lines do bump to what I'd still play them at. But nonetheless, Garrett Greene is going to be the first play, over 24.5 fantasy score. So Garrett Greene here, dual threat quarterback. He's actually was earlier in the season, like I think a top 10, maybe top 15 odds to win the Heisman. But we look at this matchup. This is a rivalry game, West Virginia versus Pitt. 2.5 point spread, with a 63.5 over under, right? Both these, I guess Vegas is predicting a high scoring matchup, super close, 2.5 point spread with a 60 plus over under. Love to target fantasy scores in these types of situations. But looking at Garrett Greene, going back to last season, over on Outlier, last season he was over this line in 7 of 12 games, and all across 12 games he averaged 26.29 fantasy points. This season he had not a great game. I think he was injured for a part of it. 5.94 fantasy points against Penn State. And last week against Albany went crazy. 34.24 fantasy points. But he's a dual threat guy. We look at over on Outlier again. There's a link in the description. You get a 7-day free trial. Over on Outlier though, I mean his rush yards or his rushing upside is just extremely high, and he actually scores a bunch of rushing touchdowns, which gives his fantasy score ceiling and floor both to be very, very high. So we go over to RotoWire here. Like I said, just last week, he finished with 236 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, also had 68 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Going back to last season, like I said, scored a ton of rushing touchdowns, so that, again, increases his fantasy score upside a ton. And it's been able to, as shown, he's actually been able to throw the ball quite a bit. Even going back to last season, you can see how many times he cleared this line. He actually cleared this line in 4 of 7 games on the road here as well. So the home versus road kind of splits for him, I don't think should be too much of a factor. If anything, I expect maybe West Virginia to be down in this game a little bit because Pittsburgh's offense, is really solid, right? We look at Pittsburgh, their offense, they're 38th in the country in points per possession, 38th, while their defense is ranked 96th, which is pretty decent. But you can see here, they've been in 2 kind of somewhat high-scoring affairs. They beat Kent State 55-24, and they beat Cincinnati 28-27, right? But looking at both of those games, which to me is interesting actually, we look at Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati. Brandon Sorsby, the quarterback for Cincinnati, he finished with 298. Let's go 298 and 3 touchdowns, and with no rushing stats, right? 8 carries for -5 yards, and in that game, Brandon Sorsby, he finished against Pittsburgh 29.4 fantasy with, again, no rushing yards. -5 rushing yards. So he actually got hit -5. Still finished with 29.4 fantasy points against the Pittsburgh defense. So that tells me that Garrett Greene, West Virginia offense should be able to move the ball. And with his rushing upside, I like this line here a lot at 24.5. So Garrett Greene over 24.5 fantasy points is going to be the first play. Also, if we look at some quick odds here, let's actually see pass TDs for Garrett Greene, over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Pretty decent odds, -190 on Bet365, -178 on FanDuel to throw 2 passing touchdowns. And if we go back to Garrett Greene here, last season in games where he did throw 2 passing touchdowns, you can see the floor for this line: 18.6, 22.5, 31, 42, 45, and 36 fantasy points in games where he did throw 2 passing touchdowns, because that rushing upside is so high. So I like Garrett Greene over 24.5 fantasy is the first play. Second play here, we're going back to him. I think this might be the 3rd straight week I'm going back to him, but I'm going with Shedeur Sanders again. If you don't like the play, don't take it. But I like Shedeur here at 22.5. I think at 22.5 for Shedeur in any matchup is a strong floor. But I said this last week. You know what happened last week, but this matchup here, 58.5 over under 7-point favorites for Colorado. Should expect them to be able to score the ball. And we look at that matchup last season. Colorado State versus Colorado went to double overtime. Shedeur threw for 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, threw a pick. Also had 9 carries for 3 yards. But Shedeur Sanders, again, I've talked about it in every previous video. He's got all the weapons. He may have the best receiving core in the country, which is why last week's game against Nebraska, I honestly underestimated Nebraska's defense. Shedeur is minus 330 on FanDuel, minus 350 on DraftKings to throw at least 2 passing touchdowns here in this game. So if we go to Shedeur Sanders last season, 2023 with Colorado, in games he threw at least 2 passing touchdowns, 31, 16.1, 30, 47, 36, 41, and 47 fantasy points. So he went over this line in 6 of 7 games when he threw at least two passing touchdowns last year. And like I said, 36.2 fantasy points last year versus Colorado State. 36.2. We look at Colorado State this season, they are the ranked 120th in the country at points per possession. 3.14 points per possession for Colorado State. Yards per attempt, 129th. Completion percentage, 109. QB rating, 179.8. So they're getting absolutely destroyed by quarterbacks. Again, 2 tough matchups, or 1 tough matchup, and then against Northern Colorado, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So we look at Texas versus Colorado State, right? Obviously, blowout, 52-0. And we kind of look at those splits. Quinn Ewers threw the ball 27 times, right? Arch Manning came in that game, just an absolute blowout. 27 times he threw the ball, 260 for 3 touchdowns. And in that game, Quinn Ewers finished with 25.8 fantasy. 25.8, which would easily clear Shedeur's 22.5 line that we see here. And then Northern Colorado, you guys, again, 0-2. I would say, I don't even know if they're an FBS team. They might actually be an FCS team. Peter Costelli threw 187, 2 touchdowns, and ran for 32 rushing yards. So Peter Costelli at quarterback at Northern Colorado had 22.7 fantasy points versus Colorado State. Again, would have cleared the line that Shedeur Sanders has currently. So we've seen both quarterbacks smash this line, or not smash this line, but clear this line versus Colorado State. Shedeur Sanders, this is a rivalry game on the road. I'm expecting this game to be close, and Shedeur to be able to clear this line pretty easily. So 2 plays for this YouTube video, guys. Garrett Greene over 24.5 fantasy, Shedeur over 22.5 fantasy. I also want to mention Daily Grind Fantasy, you guys. There's a link and a promo code TUFF in the description below this video. You guys can get 25% off your first month. We look at Daily Grind, and they do all the hard work for you. They take the lines from all the major sports books and combine them into one percentage odds to hit. And the discrepancies specifically for college football are massive, right? We look at currently Theo Weiss, wide receiver for Missouri, has the highest odds to hit under 4.5 receptions because he's currently on Fliff at minus 145, under 4.5. Right, Tez Johnson over 6.5 receptions. He's on Fliff minus 145. Even fantasy score lines like Jackson Arnold under 21 fantasy score. Again, because sports books don't offer fantasy score lines like PrizePicks or Underdog. According to his lines, Jackson Arnold's lines on Caesars, right? They accumulate the pass yards, pass TDs, rushing yards into one fantasy score line, which would be 19.8, which is a discrepancy from what his line is over on PrizePicks at 21. So again, 53.05% odds to go under 21% or 21 fantasy score for Jackson Arnold. And again, this is not just NCAA. They got all the major sports that are on PrizePicks, Underdog, Parlay Play, Better Picks, Sleeper as well. So again, you guys, link in the description and a promo code TUFF, 25% off your first month on Daily Grind. But going back to the PrizePicks, 2 player props, Garrett Greene 24.5 fantasy score over, Shedeur over 22.5 fantasy score. Please drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and as always, let's cash.